or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 9th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are Chat GPT maker OpenAI said it filed paperwork for an initial public offering that will test the appetite of investors for AI startups. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ again got a boost from tech shares, rising by 0.3% and 0.9% respectively, while the Dow Industrials fell 0.2%. Apple unveiled a new AI version of Siri, technology developed with Google that draws on user data to help answer more complicated questions and complete tasks. NVIDIA will collaborate with leading South Korean tech companies to build out AI infrastructure in Asia, aiming to expand into robotics and other industrial sectors. Amazon.com said it entered a multi-billion-dollar agreement with Corning to find optical fiber, cable, and connectivity solutions to support its growing data center footprint. Intesa Sanpaolo launched a $35 billion takeover offer for smaller rival Banca Monte dei Paschi di Siena in the latest sign of consolidation in Italy's banking industry. Novo Nordisk said prescriptions for its Wegovy weight loss pill have surpassed 3 million. Zealand Pharma shares fell after a partner said nearly 1/5 of patients in a late-stage study for an obesity shot pulled out because of gastrointestinal side effects. Campbell's fiscal third quarter sales fell 4% to $2.37 billion, the company said, attributing the softness to weak demand for snacks. Now for the key articles under the Worldwide section. The Pentagon expanded its list of companies linked to the Chinese military, including Alibaba and Baidu, limiting their U.S. operations. A Senate Democrat is introducing a bill that would restrict how the Defense Department uses artificial intelligence. Sam Bankman-Fried, the convicted co-founder of collapsed crypto exchange FTX, formally applied for a presidential pardon. Germany withdrew from a stealth fighter project with France and Spain that has seen a lack of progress. Pope Leo met with 6 survivors of clergy sexual abuse during his visit to Spain. Died Gordon S. Wood, 92, influential historian. Today's headline, Cook takes last bow at Apple's showcase event. And the picture shows Tim Cook raising his hand with the peace sign in front of the Apple logo. Signing off. Tim Cook flashes the peace sign Monday at what will be his 15th and last Apple Worldwide Developers Conference as CEO. The company's event in Cupertino, California, was highlighted by a new AI version of voice assistant Siri. The article, Apple Seeks AI Restart with New Features, by Ralph Winkler and Tina Lee. Apple showed off a new version of its Siri chatbot on Monday, technology developed with Google that the iPhone maker hopes will help power a comeback in artificial intelligence. The Siri AI digital assistant will draw on user data and messages to help answer more complicated questions and complete tasks. Executives showed Siri buying concert tickets, creating event plans, and breaking down the nutritional details in a plate of food. Siri will also be more present when writing with generative writing capabilities, automatic proofreading, and the ability to reflect a user's natural writing voice. Investors had a muted response to the highly anticipated updates at the company's annual developer conference, with Apple shares falling by about 2% after the presentation concluded. Apple's presentation showed an AI assistant rooted in capabilities that are familiar to users of OpenAI's ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude, underscoring the company's effort to match what exists in the market rather than try to exceed it. One significant difference is that the new Siri will have access to personal user data, allowing it to be far more powerful as an assistant than competing chatbots. Apple is trying to make AI feel native, useful, and invisible across the devices people already use every day, said Francisco Geronimo, a vice president at research firm IDC. The winning AI experience for consumers will not be the loudest or most technically complex. It will be the one that understands context, respects privacy, works reliably across apps, and reduces friction without forcing users to change behavior. Apple Chief Executive Tim Cook kicked off the event at the company's Cupertino, California headquarters and received an extended standing ovation from the crowd when he noted it would be his 15th and last appearance at the annual event. John Ternus, Apple's hardware boss, is set to take over for Cook on September 1st, while the longtime Apple leader will remain as chairman. In a separate session for media, Apple software executives assuaged privacy concerns about its collaboration with Alphabet's Google, saying user data isn't shared outside Apple's private cloud computing servers inside Google. Executives emphasized throughout the keynote speech how user data with Siri AI won't be accessible to anyone, even Apple. Apple also plans to create child accounts and more robust parental controls. Executives also unveiled updates to a myriad of applications such as Safari, Shortcuts, and Health, as well as adjustments to its liquid glass design. The name of the latest Mac operating system update will be Golden Gate. Other articles from the front page follow. North Korea economy becomes world's most unlikely success. Arms sales to Russia and supplies from China give boost despite sanctions. By Dashiell Yoon and Timothy W. Martin. After more than 100 visits to North Korea, Rowan Beard has come to expect long waits for a taxi under the Kim Jong-un regime. But on a recent visit to Pyongyang, his first in years, a vehicle arrived within minutes. His North Korean interpreter had whipped out a smartphone, opened an app called Samsung, and hailed a ride with a service akin to Uber. The two tracked the taxi's movements in real time. This was all totally new, said Beard, an Australian tour operator. My mind was blown. North Korea is the world's most unlikely growth story. Its economy is flourishing in ways not seen in years, aided by arms sales and troop deployments to Russia, supplies and financing from China, and the ability to flout international sanctions to import more energy, components, and materials. Chinese leader Xi Jinping traveled to North Korea this week for his first foreign trip of the year. The Kim regime slammed its borders shut during the COVID-19 pandemic. It has since reopened to only a select few outsiders, including Russian and Western travelers and diplomats. Those visitors described a North Korea unrecognizable from the past, especially its capital, Pyongyang, where Kim and the country's elite live. Restaurants there served up brick oven pizza and chicken wings. Diners can pay through a mobile QR code system. Chinese electric vehicles whiz through the streets. Pyongyang has new pet stores, an internet gaming cafe, and car dealerships selling BMWs. Kim has initiated a nationwide construction boom. Last year, North Korea built 10,000 new homes in Pyongyang, more than either Los Angeles or Chicago. During the twice-a-decade Workers' Party Congress in February, the 42-year-old dictator championed the economic turnaround, saying in a speech it had come about despite the barbaric blockade of U.S.-led economic sanctions. On display outside the building were 7 rows of rocket launchers fresh off the factory floor. Everything has fundamentally changed, Kim said. In 2017, in response to North Korea's nuclear advancement, the U.S. and United Nations tightened economic sanctions on the nation with sweeping resolutions to restrict trade and financial transactions. The Trump administration has repeatedly stated its desire for the complete denuclearization of North Korea. During his first term, Trump met with Kim 3 times, becoming the first sitting American leader to do so. But the two failed to strike a deal that curbed Pyongyang's nuclear program. Since taking office again, Trump has touted his relationship with Kim and has offered to meet again. Kim, for his part, has urged North Koreans to focus on building a self-reliant economy. The regime doesn't release official economic data, tightly controls information, and orchestrates what visitors can see. Outside the capital city, North Korea remains poor, with nearly half of its 26 million residents malnourished, according to a UN report. Its yearly gross domestic product is less than 1% of the U.S. total. The country is one of the world's worst violators of human rights, where distributing a South Korean drama can be punishable by death. South Korean think tanks reports with titles like "Sanctions Don't Show in Satellite Imagery" point to evidence that North Korea's claimed economic progress isn't mere propaganda. Vessel activity has surged at North Korea's oil storage facilities, which are being expanded. Many parking lots are more packed. North Korea now shines roughly 3 times as bright at night as it did 5 years ago, according to another report. North Korea didn't turn around its economy by itself. The Kim regime fortified its energy supply and access to construction materials by sending munitions and more than 15,000 troops to the Russian front lines in the Ukraine war. About 1/3 of those soldiers were killed or injured. The arms sales have netted Pyongyang billions of dollars, according to estimates by the Institute for National Security Strategy, or INSS, a Seoul-based think tank affiliated with South Korea's spy agency. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Iran's attack on Israel reflects new goal. Emboldened, Tehran is looking to project power across region, keep U.S. on its heels. By Lawrence Norman and Jared Malzahn. Iran's series of ballistic missile salvos aimed at Israel signal Tehran's desire to project power across the region, put Washington on the defensive, and demonstrate that it retains significant strike capabilities despite the intense air campaign waged against it by the U.S. and Israel. Tehran's leaders appear to be gambling that missile attacks and President Trump's desire to keep a possible peace deal on track will pressure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel to scale back his offensive against the Iranian-allied Hezbollah militia in Lebanon after Israel launched an airstrike in Beirut on Sunday. After a series of exchanges of fire between Israel and Iran, Tehran said on Monday it had ceased its attacks but warned that they would resume and could widen if Israel continued to strike, including in southern Lebanon. Israel also ended its attacks on Iran, but would continue to operate against Hezbollah, including in the south, a person familiar with the matter said. Iran's military headquarters said its armed forces had delivered a painful response to Israel. Should aggression and hostile actions continue, including in southern Lebanon, far more severe and forceful measures than before will follow. Iranian state media reported it as saying. In an early test of Iran's pledge, Israel carried out an airstrike in southern Lebanon on Monday, according to an Israeli military official and Lebanese state media. Hezbollah fired 3 rockets at Israeli troops in southern Lebanon afterward, some of which were intercepted on their way toward Israeli territory, Israel's military said. Iran's regime has been emboldened by surviving more than a month of airstrikes by the U.S. and Israel, and has established some deterrence against future attacks by showing it can inflict cost on the global economy by blockading the strategic Strait of Hormuz and attacking its relatively vulnerable Gulf neighbors. The White House's reluctance to restart the war, despite constant challenges to Trump's 2-month ceasefire, has bolstered Tehran's confidence that it can be more assertive without triggering military blowback. Iran's decisions show they believe they have the upper hand, with Trump deterred from renewing the fighting, said Ofer Guterman, a senior researcher at the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies. It allows them to project power, and not in a trivial way. A 24-year-old investing whiz heralded Nostradamus of AI by Peter Rudiger. Leopold Aschenbrenner's forecast about the future of artificial intelligence earned him a cult following on the internet, where his investment firm's routine, regularly filings are studied like scripture. The parabolic performance of his hedge fund has given the 24-year-old Aschenbrenner a fan club on Wall Street, too. Aschenbrenner had no professional investing experience when he launched his AI-focused firm, Situational Awareness, less than 2 years ago, with a few $100 million. Prescient stock picks and whooshes of inflows have vaulted its assets under management to more than $20 billion, said people familiar with the matter, approaching the size of Bill Ackman's Pershing Square and Dan Loeb's Third Point. Situational awareness has grown nearly fourfold after fees this year through May, and have grown more than 11 times after fees since inception, one of the people said. One of the fund's most successful bets is a stake in Anthropic that today accounts for about 1/5 of its assets, the person said. Aschenbrenner's filings are treated as blockbuster events on social media, with devotees counting the days until the next release. There's a graph on the front page called AI Deals Rake in Cash, and it shows that the global bond issuance by big AI tech companies has come from zero in 2010 to $159 billion in 2026. And the narrative, technology companies are hungry for cash to pour into data centers, and investors are forking it over through all possible means around the globe. But the scale of fundraising through stocks and bonds has some worried that Wall Street is inflating a bubble. For American Airlines analysts, it pays to watch soccer at work. The World Cup is a logistical high-wire act for the man in charge of scheduling flights, by Dean Seal. When the New England Patriots blocked a field goal in this year's AFC Championship game, putting the team on the cusp of a Super Bowl trip, Austin Sagan wasn't cheering like his Patriots-obsessed dad. He was thinking about gate constraints at Logan International Airport. My dad's going crazy because the Patriots are scoring or something, Sagan said. And I'm like, oh, we got to start getting the Boston flights ready. Sagan has a gig that any sports nut would envy. He basically gets paid to watch games. Here's the kicker. He's not a sports nut. The 29-year-old is a network planning analyst for American Airlines, and for the past year his specialty has been special events. Sometimes they're predictable. The Kentucky Derby has come to Louisville on the first Saturday of May for nearly a century. Sometimes they're not. When Taylor Swift announces a tour, Sagan jumps into action, setting up Americans' flying schedule to help fans get to shows. During single elimination tournaments, he's researching teams' fans and tracking every game to ensure American has the right number of flights within minutes of the final buzzer. I've never watched more sports in my life than in the past year, Sagan said. Then there's the World Cup, 48 nations playing 104 games across 3 continents, a fan's dream, an airline strategist's quandary. Sagan's preparation started over a year ago. Typically, much of his work involves observing trends from previous tournaments and monitoring the action as rounds progress. For this event, there was no easy comparison. The last World Cup was in Qatar, making it the most territorially compact World Cup ever. Now it's going to the other extreme, spanning Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. The closest proxy was FIFA's Club World Cup, held across 10 U.S. states last year. Sagan and his team mapped out flight paths for placeholders based on stadium locations and rough dates. Pepsi puts driverless trucks on road by Esther Fung, Phoenix. A 26,000-pound box truck loaded with Doritos and Frito-Lay chips rolls out of a distribution center bound for a Walmart store about 4 miles away. It looks like any other truck, but there is no one at the wheel. This is one of the 35 driverless trucks PepsiCo is running on Arizona roads, marking it as the first major U.S. consumer goods company to disclose the real-life, large-scale use of autonomous trucks on public roads. They are traversing highways and streets as they transport PepsiCo products between bottling plants, storage facilities, and stores like Walmart and Dollar General. At least 9 autonomous truck companies are operating in southern and south central states, especially Texas, but many have human monitors at the wheel or are being used only in limited tests. PepsiCo's operation using trucks with sensors and computers from an autonomous truck company called Gatic is a step beyond, on par with the technical hurdles being cleared by much smaller, lighter, driverless passenger taxis from Waymo, Tesla, and others. These operations that we're running today are real, said Jim Farrell, PepsiCo's Senior Vice President of Supply Chain. They are running in multiple markets in a live network. Once on the brink, U.S. Steel's oldest plant gets a new life, by Bob Tita. 2 years ago, U.S. Steel said it couldn't afford to keep operating its oldest mill near Pittsburgh. Now, new owner, Nippon Steel, is preparing to start a project that will likely keep that mill going for decades longer. Tokyo-based Nippon Steel, which bought U.S. Steel last year in a controversial deal, said it expected to spend $2 billion to $2.5 billion at Mon Valley Works over the next 3 years to replace the equipment that rolls steel. The investment is more than double Nippon Steel's original cost estimate for the project. Replacing the current 88-year-old hot strip mill at Mon Valley will lead to more domestically produced steel. The work is expected to generate as many as 6,000 jobs and up to $1.7 billion in economic activity for Pennsylvania, company executives said. The Mon Valley project will go a long way to make people feel like there's a future here, U.S. Steel Chief Executive David Burritt said in an interview. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, Israel fights while Trump talks. The U.S. demands more restraint from an ally than it does from Iran. Iran's weekend missile attack on Israel was its latest act of war amid the ceasefire, another attempt to impose a new strategic reality on its neighbors. It went differently this time because the Israelis didn't make excuses for Iran's regime in reply. After Iran first fired 11 ballistic missiles at Israel on Sunday, it would fire nearly 30 in all. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hit back with airstrikes. Israel struck reconstituted Iranian air defenses, missile sites, and a major petrochemical complex used by the Revolutionary Guard. President Trump has loudly opposed any Israeli response, but the Israeli strikes arm U.S. diplomacy. They clear the path for military action should Tehran deny Mr. Trump the deal he seeks. Hezbollah ignored the first Lebanon ceasefire negotiated by Mr. Trump in April, and on Thursday it rejected the president's latest. Israel had refrained from attacking Hezbollah in its Beirut stronghold, and the deal was to continue that forbearance if the terrorists would stop firing on Israeli towns. Early on Sunday, Hezbollah launched another such barrage, and Iran said it would strike Israel if it retaliated in Beirut. That isn't a strategic equation Israelis can tolerate. Jerusalem responded with a single strike in Beirut. As Iran's regime weighed its options, consider that Mr. Trump had dismissed its prior attacks on U.S. forces as a trifle amid the ceasefire, responding with what he called love taps. Mr. Trump didn't respond to Iran's attacks on U.S. Gulf allies, excusing the 30 missiles and drones fired on Kuwait and its airport Wednesday as not a big deal, a tit for tat. Iran took U.S. inaction as permission to escalate, an assessment Mr. Trump soon vindicated with shades of Joe Biden. The Iranian strikes didn't hurt anybody, he said, giving the regime cover behind the success of Israeli air defenses. I am going to call Bibi right now and tell him not to retaliate, the president added. Each of them had their fun. Israel had its strike, and Iran had its strike. We don't need another one. But Israel hadn't attacked Iran. It had struck Hezbollah in Lebanon, where faraway Iran has no business. Mr. Trump's logic would grant the Iranians a right of response there, in essence, a veto on Israel's self-defense. Even if it weren't election season, no Israeli leader can assent to that on his border or let an Iranian ballistic missile salvo go unanswered. Such weakness would also hurt the U.S. in nuclear talks. Mr. Netanyahu surely made these points to Mr. Trump on their Sunday call, and the president reportedly advised keeping any retaliation limited. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump's earlier statements kept him aloof from Israel's reply. He could then be seen staving off a large-scale Israeli follow-up Monday morning when Iran needed a water break. As Mr. Trump later put it, I said, "Bibi, you better be careful, or you will be on your own very soon." All of this creates the appearance of a U.S.-Israeli split, and Mr. Trump is keen to preserve talks with Iran, which he keeps insisting will bear fruit any day now. I would say an agreement would be signed on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. The president said Sunday. And now this takes place. But is Iran's regime really on the brink of signing? The regime has made a Lebanon ceasefire a prerequisite for a nuclear deal, but it also controls Hezbollah, which is refusing to cease fire. That's what brought about this military exchange. Iran ordered Hezbollah into this war and could order it out. That Iran doesn't do so should tell Mr. Trump it prefers the excuse to delay a deal and push for greater advantage. If the regime won't make a deal that meets U.S. objectives, Mr. Trump needs an alternative, and soon. The war has now passed the 100-day mark, and the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. The U.S. has been helping sneak vessels through while its own blockade punishes Iran. But the regime has also gotten away with repeated attacks while it drags out talks and rebuilds its military arsenal. In recent weeks, the U.S. position has been eroding. That changed on Sunday and Monday as Israel rolled back some of what Iran had advanced during the ceasefire. Mr. Trump now can seize the opening by giving the regime a hard deadline and empowering Israel to enforce the ceasefire against Iranian violations. Or he can continue restraining Israel in the hope that Iran gives him an escape from the war in a few more days, just a few more days. From the opinion pages. In Newark, the mayhem is the message. The protesters seek confrontation, not better conditions for ICE detainees. By William McGurn. The most obvious truth about Delaney Hall, the private building in Newark, New Jersey, where Immigration and Customs Enforcement holds people who entered the U.S. illegally, is that the protests outside its gates aren't about what the protesters say they are about. They say they're concerned with improving conditions for the detainees. Indeed, what now looks like nightly riots began with reports of maggot-infested and spoiled food. That was the most vivid example of complaints designed to promote the idea that ICE was running a hellhole. Some even call it a concentration camp, evoking what else? Nazi Germany. Over the weekend, border czar Tom Homan went to the facility on an unannounced visit to see for himself. In the cafeteria, he ate a big plate of spaghetti, which he pronounced fine. It didn't matter. The real goal of these protests has always been to shut the ICE facility down. The protesters cheerfully admit this. So do leading New Jersey Democrats. On their official X feed, Governor Mikey Sherrill has pinned a post that reads, "I am going to keep working for better conditions inside Delaney Hall until it is closed for good." She has plenty of company. Attorney General Jennifer Davenport is suing the GEO Group, the private firm running the ICE detention center, demanding access. Ras Baraka, mayor of Newark, is likewise attempting to shut the facility down via the courts. But the protests put them in an awkward position. Democrats such as Governor Sherrill don't want to end up like Governor Tim Walz, who was rendered weak and hapless by the breakdown of law and order during ICE protests in and around Minneapolis. So New Jersey's Democrats have to pretend the real cause of the unrest around Delaney Hall is ICE, not protesters who throw rocks and vandalize cars leaving and entering the Delaney facility. Their goal is, and they've said it, the governor said it, the mayor said it, this is about shutting down that facility, and to the politicians on the Hill, it's about abolishing ICE, Mr. Holman said last week. It's mostly peaceful protest all over again. Meanwhile, the clashes make for vivid television, but it's a combustible mixture. In Minneapolis in January, 2 clashes with immigration officers proved fatal. For a 37-year-old mother of 3, Renee Good, and 2.5 weeks later for nurse Alex Preddy, also 37. That's what happens when protesters aggressively disrupt law enforcement. At Delaney Hall, nothing much happens while the sun is out. In the early evening, protesters trickle in, shouting slogans and harassing drivers. It's like watching stage actors rehearse the same lines they recite every night. The setting is inconvenient. Delaney Hall is in the industrial section of Newark, close to a massive NJ Transit bus garage. It isn't hard to get there by car, though Newark police have the entrance on Doremus Avenue blocked off to traffic. It's less than 2 miles from Newark Liberty International Airport. As Mr. Holman and others have made clear, the administration is determined not to let protesters stop them from keeping this facility running. The border czar says the protesters are organized, well supplied, and busy feeding the media allegations of abuse that are long on sensationalism and short on names and details that can be investigated. One charge that peeves him is overcrowding. Mr. Holman says Delaney Hall has capacity for 1,000 people, but is holding only 706. If the anti-ICE movement were to shut down Delaney Hall, he told CBS News, ICE would transfer the detainees to other states. Here's what they're not talking about, Mr. Holman said. You want to shut down the facility. Then every illegal alien we arrest in that state will fly to Texas, will fly to Arizona. If I can't detain them in that city where they're close to their families, then we'll have to move them someplace else. How does that benefit the migrant community? In this drama, the sensible is always the loser. Just ask Governor Sherrill. When she called in New Jersey state troopers to impose order outside Delaney Hall, she made clear that the enemy of peace is ICE, not the protesters who were actually fighting the troopers. The anti-ICE rioters are having none of it. Many of them see Ms. Cheryl as no better than Donald Trump because she worked to prevent what might have been a Minneapolis-style tragedy in her state. It's a perverse death wish with the half hope that someone will be killed in the clashes with law enforcement, so New Jersey will have its progressive martyrs to energize the cause. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Taiwan needs U.S. arms now. Washington is dragging its feet on delivery, weakening deterrence, and amplifying the threat from Beijing. By Seth G. Jones. By dragging its feet on a $14 billion arms package to Taiwan, the U.S. risks emboldening China and undermining American deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan desperately needs these air defense systems, missiles, drones, and other weapons to defend itself against China. Even more concerning, there is an additional $30 billion backlog of U.S.-approved arms to Taiwan that need to be delivered fast. China presents the most serious threat to the U.S. as the Trump administration's national defense strategy concludes. President Xi Jinping is bent on expanding Chinese power throughout the Indo-Pacific and beyond, not only swallowing up Taiwan. To do this, China is rapidly arming, expanding its global network of bases, and building weapons at a massive scale in all the major domains of warfare: air, land, naval, space, cyber, and nuclear capabilities. China also presents a serious ideological threat. The Communist Party's core principles and values are antithetical to those of the U.S. and its democratic allies. Beijing stifles democracy, brutally represses dissent, and eviscerates freedom of speech. U.S. policymakers have long insisted that China and Taiwan need to agree mutually and peacefully on a resolution of the status of Taiwan. The Taiwan Relations Act, which President Jimmy Carter signed into law in 1979, legally commits the U.S. to provide such defense articles and defense services in such quantity as may be necessary to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability. While China wants to reunify with Taiwan, the situation has become complicated because Taiwan is democratic, its government supports freedom of the press and religion, and its people increasingly view themselves as culturally and politically distinct from China. But Mr. Xi has been bellicose about the island. The People's Liberation Army has conducted exercises that rehearse a blockade and invasion of Taiwan involving missiles, drones, ships, bombers, and fighter aircraft. Last month, Mr. Xi warned President Trump that any U.S. missteps on Taiwan could lead to war. Chinese leaders have also indicated that one of their top requests of the Trump administration is to prevent additional U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, particularly if Washington wants a closer trade and diplomatic relationship with Beijing. Beijing's approach is blatant extortion. A promise of greater trade in exchange for U.S. appeasement on Taiwan. This threat may be working. The U.S. has held off announcing a critical $14 billion arms deal for Taiwan that includes PAC-3 air defense missiles, National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, counter-drone systems, and other material crucial for Taiwan's defense. America's $30 billion backlog of arms deliveries to Taiwan dates at least to the Biden administration. The backlog includes Harpoon coastal defense systems, M142 high-mobility artillery rocket systems, F-16 fighter jets, and Altius drones. Taiwan's National Defense Ministry reported this year that out of 23 main U.S. defense items promised over the past 10 years, 5 have been completely delivered, 3 have been partially delivered, and 15 haven't yet been delivered. The failure to deliver key defensive systems undermines a core logic of preventing war in the Indo-Pacific, known as deterrence by denial, which involves convincing China that it can't achieve its military or political objectives through war. Deterrence by denial hinges on providing Taiwan with the weapons and other equipment it needs to defend itself, and thus deter Chinese aggression. In addition, arms sales and deliveries are a tangible signal of U.S. political commitment to Taiwan and U.S. credibility in a region where countries are worried about China's growing capabilities and intentions. U.S. delays have caused concern in Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines, and other regional countries about U.S. commitment. Mr. Xi and the Communist Party have ordered the People's Liberation Army to be ready to conduct a successful invasion of Taiwan by next year. The U.S. is delivering roughly $4 billion of arms to Taiwan a year, which means that it could take a decade at the current pace to deliver all promised aid. That is too late to help Taiwan. The solution is straightforward. The Trump administration needs to approve the $14 billion arms package and accelerate delivery of the promised $30 billion in arms sales to Taiwan. Otherwise, the U.S. will undermine deterrence in the region and increase the prospect for war. Mr. Jones is president of the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and author of The American Edge, The Military Tech Nexus and the Sources of Great Power Dominance. Letters to the editor, the topic, Remember What They Did to Dean Phillips. It would probably have been hard for Joe Biden's inner circle to encourage his departure in 2024, even if they were so inclined. As Barton Swaim notes in Why Jill Biden Didn't Say No, the intellectual bankruptcy of the American left mandates a fawning allegiance to any ideological ally in power, no matter what his personal faults. So it was that in 2024, the American Political Science Association rated Mr. Biden the 14th greatest president in U.S. history, ahead of Andrew Jackson and James Monroe, and tied with John Adams. If biased, assessments masquerade as honest analysis, Democrats are doomed to be led by substandard candidates. From Thomas F. Berner, Yonkers, New York. Same topic. Miss Biden's new book has refocused attention on her questionable judgment and motivation in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. While of concern, I care quite a bit more about Kamala Harris's decision-making than Mrs. Biden's. Prior to the election, then Vice President Harris famously denied observing any diminishment in the president's mental capacities. This tells me she is either remarkably unobservant or willing to mislead the public. From Gary Nudd, Scottsdale, Arizona. New topic, try my omelet principle. William A. Galston's Where Conservatives and Liberals Can Agree, June 3rd, is a reminder of something increasingly overlooked. America's strength doesn't come from agreement on policy, but agreement on principles that govern our disagreements. I often explain this with my omelet principle of discernment. An omelet may contain many ingredients: bacon, cheese, tomatoes. You can argue endlessly over the best combination. But remove the eggs, it's no longer an omelet. These days, we spend more time debating particular ingredients than preserving the core element that has defined our nation for 250 years. Foreign policy, immigration, or healthcare are all omelet add-ins, legitimate subjects for debate. The eggs are the constitutional principles that define our nation: liberty, equality before the law, free speech, due process, self-government, and the rule of law. Debate ham versus mushrooms all you want, but don't toss the eggs. By Ernie Loynez, Palmetto Bay, Florida. The Pepper and Salt cartoon shows a young woman with crazy hair talking to what appears to be her older father. There's always a bright side. It's just that sometimes it's not the side facing you. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 9th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day or evening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings, 24 hours a day, of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service has broadcast almost 40 years of radio readings to those without sight. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service,